Siren crouched behind a crumbling bulkhead, her exosuit's optics flickering as the heat from another plasma burst seared past. The landscape of Emberthorn 4 stretched out in a hellish panorama before her. Jagged peaks of molten rock, the broken skeletons of colony structures, and an endless horizon of scorched terrain. The air itself seemed to shimmer under the constant barrage of Escaon drones, their sleek black carapaces reflecting the hellish light. Somewhere overhead, her last drone, a worn, patched-up reconnaissance unit she'd affectionately named Kix, buzzed back to her location. "Report," she rasped. Her throat was raw from inhaling smoke and grit. Kix emitted a series of fractured tones, its voice module damaged beyond repair, but Siren had learned to interpret its chirps and clicks. No reinforcements, no survivors. She was still alone. "Figures," she muttered, shoving the drone back into its charging dock. She tightened her grip on her rifle, the ammo counter flashing. A dismal 6% remaining. That wouldn't last another skirmish. 3 weeks ago, she had been the scout officer aboard the Vanguard Dusk, a ship tasked with mapping and patrolling the frontier regions. They weren't supposed to encounter the Escaon swarm. The swarm was a distant nightmare, a persistent threat, but one the higher-ups insisted was contained on the other side of the sector. Until it wasn't. When the first wave hit, it was chaos. The swarm overwhelmed their battle groups in hours, picking apart ships like a starved pack of feral beasts. Siren had barely made it to a drop pod as the Vanguard Dusk crumpled into a ball of twisted metal. She watched her crewmates die on the feeds as her pod hurtled through Emberthorn's atmosphere. The last voice she'd heard before the comms fell silent was Commander Lynn's, his calm, resolute tone refusing to convey the doom that she knew awaited them all. She shook herself back to the present. The Escaon drones had been relentless since she touched down. At first, she thought she might outlast them, keep moving, scavenging supplies from the wreckage of the colony's settlements. But the swarm wasn't just a mindless horde. They adapted. They tracked her more efficiently each time she tried to slip away. Her once gleaming exosuit now looked like a patchwork relic. The right forearm plating had been ripped off in a close encounter, exposing the fragile sensor lines beneath. The suit's energy shielding had failed days ago, leaving her to rely on natural cover. What little of it remained. Siren exhaled slowly, trying to regulate her breathing. She peeked over the bulkhead, her helmet's HUD struggling to identify the threats in the hazy, heat-distorted air. The drones were regrouping, their eerie, synchronized movements making them seem like extensions of the same monstrous organism. She counted 20. No, 24. Too many. She flexed her fingers, wincing as a sharp pain lanced through her left wrist. The med gel she'd applied the night before was wearing off, and she was nearly out of the stuff. Another brutal skirmish, and she might not have the strength to hold a weapon steady. She considered her options. Retreat again, further into the ash-covered mountains. But there were fewer places to hide, and she couldn't run forever. Her gaze drifted to the sky, searching for a miracle. She knew it wouldn't come, but some stubborn part of her still hoped. Maybe a friendly ship would break through the swarms, orbital blockade. Maybe the Navy would send a rescue party. Instead, the only thing that filled the sky was the crimson glow of Emberthorn's burning atmosphere. A deep rumble echoed in the distance. Another settlement succumbing to the drones. Another pocket of survivors crushed. She looked away, feeling a pang of guilt. She should have been there, helping them. But what could she do with a rifle running on fumes and a body on the verge of collapse? Her mind wandered back to the last transmission she'd received from the fleet. A garbled, static-filled burst that cut off before any clear orders could be given. Survive, she thought she heard. Or maybe it was just her imagination. Survive. That was what she'd been doing every second since she hit the ground. A sharp ping jolted her focus back to the present. Kix had detected movement. Another wave was approaching. The drone chirped an alert, its tone higher and more frantic than usual. This time it wasn't just the normal patrol. It was a full strike group. Siren's gut clenched. They were closing in, coming to finish what the first waves had started. She pressed her back against the bulkhead, gritting her teeth. Her suit systems threw up warning messages. Low power, critical injuries, compromised structural integrity. "You don't need to remind me," she muttered at the HUD. No more running, she decided. If this was where it ended, she wouldn't go out cowering. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, setting her stance. Her hand found the emergency blade, mounted on her hip. One way or another, she'd make the swarm remember her name. Siren pressed her back against the scorched bulkhead, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. The latest wave of Escaon drones was closing in fast, faster than she could retreat. Kix, her battered recon drone, buzzed anxiously at her side, its damaged optics casting faint flickers across the twisted metal around them. The ping on her HUD told her the drones would be in range within seconds. She braced herself, clutching her rifle tight. With only a few rounds left, she'd have to make every shot count. There'd be no reloading this time. As much as she wanted to give up, let the fight end here and now, something deep inside wouldn't let her. Not yet. If nothing else, she'd go down fighting. The first drone emerged from the shimmering heat, its sleek black frame reflecting the fires licking at the ground. Siren exhaled slowly and pulled the trigger. The plasma burst hit dead center, sending the drone into a spiral of sparks and shrapnel. She swung her weapon toward the next, but before she could fire, another streak of plasma sliced through the air, taking the drone out in a flash of orange light. Siren froze. That hadn't been her shot. Another blast tore through a third drone, then a fourth. Confusion churned in her gut as she ducked back behind cover, scanning the battlefield through her flickering HUD. A shadow moved through the haze, too large to be one of the drones. It moved with precision, smooth, calculated, human. Then she heard it. A voice, coarse and unmistakably human, crackled through her comms channel. "Hold your position. I'm almost there." Siren's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard a human voice since the Vanguard dusk fell. The Escaon swarm's jamming tech had blocked most communications. The idea that someone else had survived, someone who could fight, sent a mix of hope and wariness through her. She forced herself to stay focused, firing off another shot and dropping another drone. Whatever was happening, she'd worry about it after she survived the next few minutes. The figure moved closer, ducking under a burst of alien fire and returning, a devastating counterattack. In the smoky heat, Siren could barely make out the details of their armor. Scarred plates that looked like they'd been through hell, a cracked visor that glinted faintly as they moved. But the mark on their shoulder stood out, a faded insignia she didn't recognize. Not from her fleet, not from any branch she knew. They weren't Navy, that was for sure. The strangers slid into cover beside her, their breathing heavy but steady. They raised their weapon, a compact energy rifle she'd never seen before, and fired off a controlled burst. 3 drones went down in quick succession. The rest, sensing the sudden shift in firepower, scattered and retreated into the distance. Siren tightened her grip on her rifle, unsure whether to thank the newcomer or demand an explanation. "Who the hell are you?" she asked, her voice more hostile than she intended. The weeks of isolation had stripped away any trace of diplomacy. The stranger turned toward her, their visor reflecting the burning horizon. "Name's Cade," they said, voice low and gravelly. "Major Cade. Marin, I picked up your signal." She frowned. "Signal?" He gestured toward her exosuit's comm system. "Your suit's been broadcasting a short-range beacon. Pretty faint, but I managed to track it. I've been combing through debris fields for weeks trying to find someone, anyone, who's still alive out here." Siren didn't know how to respond. A part of her wanted to believe him, but another part screamed that this was too good to be true. She glanced at the insignia on his armor again. "You're not fleet." "Not anymore," Cade replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Let's just say I've been fighting this war from a different angle. You're not the only one who got stranded when the swarm broke through the lines." Before she could press him for more details, Cade straightened up, scanning the horizon. "We don't have much time. They'll regroup and come back in greater numbers. I've got a safer spot a few clicks from here. We'll talk there." Siren hesitated. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her survival hanging by a thread. But Cade had saved her life just now. If he was leading her into a trap, why help her at all? Finally, she nodded. Lead the way. But if this is a trick... He smiled faintly, though his expression stayed grim. You'll see soon enough. Stick close. And just like that, she wasn't alone anymore. Cade moved like someone who'd been fighting since the war began. Steady, efficient, and quiet. Siren followed, unsure if this twist of fate was a blessing or a curse, but willing to find out. Siren tightened the straps on her exosuit's chest plate, her movements methodical and practiced. The reinforced shelter Cade had led her to, a collapsed hangar half buried under volcanic ash, offered little in the way of comfort. But it was cover, and for now, that was all she needed. Cade crouched across from her, tinkering with a handheld device. The faint blue glow of its interface highlighted the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. He'd removed his helmet, revealing close-cropped hair and a network of scars running along his jaw and temple. Siren hadn't asked him about them. Not yet. You've been alone out here a long time, haven't you? He asked, not looking up from the device. Too long, Siren admitted. The last person I spoke to was my commander, right before the Vanguard dusk went down. Cade nodded slowly. It's the same all over. The swarm doesn't leave survivors, and the ones who do make it through don't stay alive long. You seem to have beaten the odds, Siren noted, crossing her arms. What makes you so special? Cade finally looked up, his gray eyes sharp. I've been fighting these things for years, even before they reach the frontier. I know how they think, how they move. I know how to hurt them. He set the device down, straightening. And I'm guessing if you've survived this long, you know a thing or two yourself. Siren didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him. He had a soldier's bearing, but something about him felt different. He carried himself like someone who had long since stopped relying on backup. And that insignia, she still didn't recognize it. I know how to stay alive, she said at last. That's not the same as winning. Sometimes staying alive is winning, Cade said. But if you want to push back, if you want to hit them where it hurts, we're going to need a plan. Siren sighed, leaning back against the cold metal wall. I'm not exactly swimming in resources here, Major. My exosuit's falling apart, my rifle's nearly out of charge, and my drone's held together with scrap and hope. What plan do you think we can actually pull off? Cade tilted his head, a faint smirk playing at his lips. You think you're the only one scrounging for survival? You'd be amazed what I've managed to cobble together. Advanced tech, stolen from the swarm, weapons they haven't seen before. I can teach you how to use it, how to outthink them. The mention of stolen swarm tech made Siren narrow her eyes. You've been inside their systems? Not just inside, Cade said. I've taken some of their tools and turned them against them. It's dangerous, sure, but it works. There was something almost infectious in the way he said it, a spark of defiance Siren hadn't felt in weeks. Still, her doubts lingered. She wasn't ready to put blind faith in a stranger, no matter how many drones he'd gunned down for her. So what's your grand strategy? She asked, crossing her arms. You said you have a plan. We hit their hive, Cade replied bluntly. The main one on this planet. It's not just a staging ground. It's where they process all their data, where they manufacture their drones. If we take it out, we cripple their operation here, maybe long enough for Fleet to regroup. Siren's skepticism deepened. You make it sound simple. It's not. It's suicide if we don't do it right, Cade admitted. But it's better than waiting around to get picked off. You've seen how they adapt. If we keep running, they'll corner us eventually. At least this way, we go down swinging. And maybe we buy time for someone else. The thought gnawed at her. She wasn't ready to die. Not yet. But Cade wasn't wrong. The drones would find her again, whether she stayed in the mountains or buried herself deeper in the colony's ruins. If she wanted to live, she had to do more than just survive. She had to fight back. You've done this before? She asked, her voice quieter. Not exactly like this, Cade admitted. But I've taken down other hives. This one's bigger, better protected. We'll need to move carefully, strike fast, and get out before they bring in reinforcements. But it can be done. Siren weighed his words. She thought of the long days and nights spent hiding, scavenging, struggling to breathe inside her damaged suit. She thought of her crew, lost to the vacuum of space or devoured by the swarm's relentless advance. And she thought of that last, desperate communication from Commander Lin. Survive. Surviving was no longer enough. "All right," she said finally. "I'm in." Cade nodded, his expression hard but satisfied. "Good. We start at first light." The hive loomed before them, a twisted citadel of black spires and pulsing organic walls. Tendrils of alien material stretched out like arteries into the charred ground, pulsating faintly in the dim, acrid light. The sky above burned orange and violet as Emberthorn's seething atmosphere reflected the fires below. Siren stood at the edge of the ridge overlooking the hive, her grip on the modified energy rifle tight. Cade knelt beside her, adjusting the charge settings on his weapon, his expression grim. They had planned as carefully as two desperate survivors could. Cade's scavenged tech gave them a chance. Barely. A stolen disruptor node, taken from a downed drone, would let them scramble the hive's outer defenses. Siren's tactical knowledge and Cade's improvised weaponry would have to do the rest. The objective was simple: plant a high-yield charge at the hive's central processing core. If the plan worked, it would cause a chain reaction that would cripple the hive's operations for weeks, maybe months. If it didn't, well, there wouldn't be much left of either of them to worry about that. Siren took a slow breath, her visor tinting to block out the radiating heat waves. "You sure about this?" she asked, though the question was mostly rhetorical. Cade shot her a glance. "No, but it's the best shot we've got." That was enough. Siren checked her rifle one last time, her mind replaying the strategy over and over. Infiltrate through a maintenance shaft Cade had identified in one of the hive's outer nodes. Plant the disruptor node at the base of the main tower. Push through to the core while the swarm's internal network scrambled, and trigger the charge. Then run, if there was still a run left to be had. Cade motioned her forward, and together they descended into the ash-choked valley. The heat grew more oppressive with every step, the air thick with a metallic tang that burned the back of Siren's throat. Cade's route was sound, leading them through the husks of shattered colony transports and blackened jungle growth, now twisted and skeletal. They moved in silence, the only sounds the faint hum of their suits and the distant thrum of the hive. The entrance to the maintenance shaft was just as Cade had described, half collapsed but passable. Cade wedged open the warped metal panel, and they slipped inside, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The corridor was narrow, lined with alien growths that pulsed with a sickly bioluminescence. Siren felt a shiver run down her spine. This was not a place meant for humans. Cade brought up his hand, signaling a stop. He held up a scanner, and a faint ping emitted. "Clear for now," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. They crept forward, each step measured, each movement deliberate. Siren could feel her heartbeat pounding in her chest, her grip on her rifle firm. The deeper they went, the more alien the environment became. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting, and expanding in a slow rhythmic pattern. Strange sounds echoed from deeper within. Metallic clicks, the hum of distant machinery, and the faint skittering of drones on patrol. Finally, they reached the base of the main tower. Cade pulled out the disruptor node, a compact device cobbled together from scavenged parts. It pulsed with a faint bluish light as he activated it. He knelt, planting it against the organic material at the base of the structure. The moment he pressed it in, a high-pitched whine began, barely perceptible but unmistakably alien. The walls seemed to ripple in response. Siren's HUD flashed a warning. "Hostiles inbound." "Get ready," Cade said, rising to his feet. "They know we're here." The first wave hit like a hammer. Drones emerged from the shadows, their carapaces glinting as they charged. Siren raised her rifle and fired, each shot precise, dropping drones before they could close the gap. Cade moved with deadly efficiency, his modified energy rifle carving through the swarm in controlled bursts. They fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if they'd trained together for years. Drones exploded in flashes of light, their shattered remains clattering to the ground. "Disruptor's doing its job," Cade shouted over the din. "We've got a window, let's move." They pushed forward, the drones momentarily disoriented by the scrambled signals. The corridors became a blur of motion and fire, Siren's focus narrowing to each target, each step. Despite the overwhelming numbers, they kept moving, never stopping long enough to be pinned down. Each time the drones started to recover, Cade's stolen tech bought them another few precious seconds. At last, they reached the central core, HFY, massive pulsating structure, its surface covered in alien runes that glowed faintly. The energy here was almost palpable, the air vibrating with the hum of the hive's primary processing node. Cade pulled out the charge, a high-yield device that looked as improvised as everything else he carried. Siren provided cover, her rifle spitting plasma as more drones closed in. She felt the heat against her armor, heard the screams of charging engines, but she held the line. "Charge set," Cade yelled. "We've got 30 seconds, go, go, go." They ran. Siren didn't look back, her legs burning as she sprinted through the winding corridors. Kicks buzzed erratically, its battered frame barely keeping up. Drones poured after them, relentless and unyielding. Cade tossed a fragmentation charge over his shoulder, the explosion buying them a few more seconds. The moment they cleared the maintenance shaft, the hive erupted behind them. A searing flash of light turned the horizon white, followed by a shockwave that knocked them both to the ground. Siren hit the dirt hard, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. She struggled to push herself up, coughing as dust and ash rained down around them. When the light faded and the rumbling ceased, she turned back to see the hive's spires collapsing, flames consuming the once immovable structure. The drones, scattered, their formation broken, their movements erratic. For the first time, the swarm wasn't advancing. It was retreating. Siren collapsed onto her back, staring up at the darkening sky. Beside her, Cade let out a low, exhausted chuckle. "Well," he said, his voice rough but triumphant, "that'll give them something to think about." She turned her head to look at him. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Hope. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for now, she wasn't alone. And for now, that was enough.